Hello and welcome to the Yellow Chair Classroom. Another interesting story. Once upon a time, there was a tailor who had 3 sons: long-legged Michael, fat Frank, and foolish John. He also had a goat that he was very fond of. The goat lived in the barn and was kept mainly to provide milk for the family. But in order to provide milk, the goat had to be well fed. Each day, one of the boys in turn took the goat to the pasture. One day, when long-legged Michael took the goat out to pasture, the boy fell asleep under a tree while the goat roamed about the meadows, filling her stomach with leaves and grass. At the end of the day, Michael asked the goat, "Did you have enough to eat? Are you full?" "Oh yes," the goat answered. "I have had plenty to eat. Thank you, I don't want anything else." But that night, when the father asked whether she had eaten enough, the goat lied. "How can I have eaten enough when I didn't find one little leaf?" she whined miserably. The tailor turned in anger to long-legged Michael. "How can you be so lazy and cruel to take this poor goat out to graze and then just go to sleep without making sure she had enough food?" The young man admitted that he had fallen asleep, but he insisted that the goat had eaten well. But his father, too angry to see the truth, sent his son away from home. Fat Frank was tricked by the crafty animal too. After spending a day in the pasture with Frank and eating as much as possible could, the goat complained pitifully that she had not found a single thing to satisfy her hunger. Again the tailor believed the mischievous goat and angrily sent his son away from home. Foolish John, the youngest son, met the same fate as his brothers. From then on, the tailor cared for the goat himself and took her to the best places to feed. He was delighted to see his animal eating the tenderest grass and the sweetest leaves, and felt himself getting angry all over again at the thought of his 3 sons not taking proper care of the goat. For a while, the goat was content. But one night, the ungrateful beast complained to the tailor that she had not found a decent morsel to eat all day. This time, the tailor knew that the goat was lying. He had been with the goat out in the meadow and had seen her eating the tender grass and leaves. He then realized that his sons were not to blame. The goat had tricked them all. He felt ashamed and he regretted that he had sent his sons away. Sadly, he wished with all his heart that they would come home again. But it was too late. Each of the boys had traveled his separate way. Left alone and filled with rage, the tailor turned his anger to the sly animal who tricked him. "You are the cause of all my sorrow," he shouted at the faithless goat. "My sons would still be here if it were not for you." Then he raised his whip furiously, cracked it to the air right above the goat's head, and he chased the miserable creature away for good. As a matter of fact, long-legged Michael was working as an apprentice to a carpenter. He learned his trade easily and pleased his master with his effort and talent. When his training was completed, Michael wanted to return home. He missed his brothers and wanted to see his father too. His master was so happy with the young man's work that he wanted to give him a farewell present and so the carpenter gave long-legged Michael a little table. "Listen well, Michael," the carpenter said. "This is a magic table. When you tell the table to get set, it will instantly serve you the most delicious foods." Michael was amazed and grateful. He thanked his master politely and set out for home carrying the table on his back. On his way, he spent the night at an inn. When he arrived, he didn't ask for anything to eat or drink. He just took the little table to his room and shut the door. The innkeeper, a cunning and a curious man, peeked through the keyhole. To his surprise, he saw the table set itself with the tastiest food and the finest wines. "Oh my," he thought greedily, "I must have that table." That night, he crept into the room and stole the magic table, leaving an ordinary one in its place. When Michael returned home, his father was overjoyed. A big party was planned. Naturally, Michael wanted the magic table to prepare a grand feast, and although he told the table to set out the food over and over again, nothing happened. Michael stood there foolishly as his friends laughed and laughed. How could they believe that a table set itself? He knew then that the innkeeper had tricked him. In the meantime, the second son, Fat Frank, was an apprentice to a miller, and as soon as he completed his work, he too wanted to return to his father. The kind miller gave him a miraculous donkey as a farewell present. "Tell the donkey to stretch his neck," the miller explained, "and gold coins will pour from his mouth." Frank was amazed and thrilled. He thanked the miller and set out from home riding his magic donkey. But he had to spend one night at the inn too. And while he slept, the sly innkeeper stole his golden donkey. The next day, Frank rode home on an ordinary donkey, unaware of what he had lost. When he tried to show his father what his marvelous donkey could do, nothing happened. And Frank knew that the innkeeper had tricked him too. Now the youngest son, foolish John, became a turner by trade. And when he was leaving to go home, his master gave him a precious sack. "Just shout, 'Stick, come out of the sack,' and you will always be helped," his master explained. On the way home, foolish John spent the night at the same inn. When the greedy innkeeper saw the sack, he thought, "That must be filled with magic and I must have it." But John had heard about his brother's bad luck, so he went to sleep with the sack under his head, guarding it carefully. When the innkeeper slipped into his room, John lay still pretending to be asleep. And when the wicked man tried to pull the sack out from beneath him, John raised his head and shouted, "Stick, come out of the sack." The stick flew from the sack and began to pound the innkeeper. The man screamed for help, but no one came. He begged for mercy, but John only wanted two things, the table and the donkey. The greedy innkeeper pleaded and even offered John money, but finally he gave in. So John set out with the magic sack, the donkey and the table. When he arrived home, his father and brothers were delighted. This time there was truly a grand celebration, and this time, to everyone's amazement, the table set out a magical feast of roasts and fish, cakes and wines. And the donkey opened his mouth, and out came enough gold coins to fill everyone's empty pockets. From that day on, joy and laughter filled the lives of foolish John and his brothers, and they all lived together happily.